I want to at least talk about what they call the 5 Ds. So hopefully most of you have your estate planning documents in order. Why? If something happens to you, you want to make sure your spouse, your family are all taken care of, your assets are moving. We always describe estate planning as taking what you have, giving it to who you want, when you want, with any conditions. So what are you doing for the estate planning for your business? Okay, what happens if there's a death of the business owner? And we'll just assume for now there's two owners. All right, so you have a death of an owner. So what's going to happen? Unfortunately, God forbid, because we all have an expiration date. We just don't know when that expiration date is. So we have an untimely death. I don't think there's ever a timely death, but what happens to the business? What happens to your partner? What happens to the vendors? What happens to your family? How does this all get handled? The same thing happens when there's a disability. You're in a skiing accident and, it's something that you can return from, but you can't return for 18 months. Well, what's going to happen? And what happens if that disability becomes permanent and you can't really return to your former self and be active in the business? What happens to your shares? Who's going to fill that void? Because normally most owners, sit in an important chair within the organization. Listen, we don't like to talk about divorce, but the statistics back it up. Half of all marriages end in a divorce. Well, I'm sure your partner doesn't want to become partners with your spouse. So what are the plans for handling things when there is a divorce? Was there a prenup put in place? Is there going to be an automatic buyout of the spouse if half the assets have to go to her? Well, let's face it, for many business owners, the business is probably the most substantial asset on the business, especially if it's a very successful one. We talk about partners. You start out, we're all buds, we're chums, we're working hard, and we never think we're going to have a disagreement. And it doesn't even have to be a disagreement. But if there is a disagreement and I want out, how is the business going to be valued? How are you going to buy me out? I don't want to be partners with you anymore. But like I said, it doesn't even have to be a disagreement. We both planned on working until we're 60 and getting out, and now I'm 50 and I just don't want to do it anymore. Maybe the business is successful enough and I just want the money and I want to run and do other things, or I'm just burnt out. In either case, there needs to be a format for that exiting partner. And listen, what did we just go through in 2020? How many businesses went out of business because of, COVID and all the restrictions and businesses being shut down and not returning to their former self? These are what they call the 5 Ds.